The children stuck out their tongues, and the teacher put small pieces of newspaper in their mouths. Because the printed ink had a slightly sweet taste, they were poor kids who had never tasted candy in their entire lives. Among them, this boy was the poorest. His father didn't even have money to buy proper shoes. He only repaired old ones with glue and torn rubber from used tires. So the boy didn't like those shoes, but he never dared to complain. The next day, when he went to school wearing those strange shoes, all his classmates started laughing at him. He tried to protect his younger brother from the crowd so no one would make fun of him too. Later, he threw his shoes into the trash bin. During class, the teacher noticed he was barefoot and got very angry.
No, sir.
Oh, why?
The teacher never allowed anyone without shoes to sit in his class, so the boy was forced to wear those old shoes again. The students started laughing once more. The teacher banged his stick on the table and the whole class went silent. He said the boy should not feel ashamed for not having shoes, because even he once lived without them. He explained to everyone that people who mock others for being poor should be ashamed of themselves. After hearing that, the boy regained his confidence, but his bad luck continued. His father lost his job and the family became even poorer. The boy had to eat spoiled food every day and fainted from weakness. He was taken to the hospital, but was quickly discharged because the family had no money. Things got worse when a new baby was born. His mother went every day to collect food from the charity center and often had to borrow from others. Seeing all this, the boy realized he needed to earn money. He went to a factory and started working in a coal mine. Because of his hard work, the boss gave him a glass of lemonade and rewarded him with 1 shilling. The boy was very happy. He ran home and gave all the money to his mother. His red eyes worried her. She brought water and cleaned his coal-covered face. From that day, the boy worked every day and gave all his earnings to his mother. But one day she said, "Stop going to the factory. Your eyes are badly damaged. You can barely see now." The boy was taken back to the hospital, and luckily his eyesight was restored. But all the savings of the family were gone in his treatment. Both her husband and son had been murdered by Don Ciccio, the village's most powerful mob boss, and now this desperate mother was bringing her last remaining boy right to his doorstep.
Che piacere, Sparagnatevi, sto figlio mio. Signoruzzo mio, vi giuro che non fa niente quel signorino.
It was the only way this mother could think of to save her boy's life. But the boy didn't cower like his mother did. He seemed born without fear, his eyes locked on his enemy with an unblinking stare. The ruthless Ciccio felt no sympathy for the mother and son, despite the woman's pleas. The mother had no choice but to fight back with everything she had, a frail woman taking on a powerful mafia boss to buy her son time. The boy, Vito, watched his mother fall, yet still there was no fear in his eyes. He listened to his mother and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. Being small and nimble, he quickly vanished into the woods. Don Ciccio ordered his men to set up a dragnet throughout the village, determined to finish the job and terrorize the villagers with a threat. Anyone who sheltered the boy would see their whole family killed. But there were still good people brave enough to protect him. They hid him in a cart loaded with firewood and got him out of the village before dawn. The boy survived and eventually made it to America with the wave of immigrants. This lucky kid, blessed by fate, was named Vito Andolini. But at immigration, the officer mistakenly took his village name for his last name. And just like that, a name that would echo throughout America was born.
Vito Corleone.
The boy's fearless nature would one day make him unstoppable. He would tell everyone who didn't show him respect.
You don't even think to call me Godfather.
Godfather?
In this series, I'll be breaking down the Godfather trilogy for you guys, showing you why it's considered the ultimate handbook for a man's success. We'll go in chronological order, starting with the young Don's rise to power from the Godfather Part 2. Young Vito Corleone was diagnosed with smallpox right after arriving in America. But back then, our country was pretty welcoming to immigrants. Instead of deporting him, they quarantined him on Ellis Island for 3 months. Now he was an orphan adrift in a foreign land. He hadn't shed a tear when his father was killed, when his brother died suddenly, or when his mother was murdered. But now, staring out at the Statue of Liberty, he began singing a song from his homeland of Sicily. No one could have imagined that this lonely 9-year-old boy would carve out an empire in this country. Flash forward to 1917. Vito, now past 25, had barely managed to settle down in New York. He had his first son, Sonny. Life was tough, but having a family meant having hope. Having lost his family once before made him treasure his loved ones above all else. So when his friend invited him to the theater to check out a girl he was interested in, Vito's response was pretty unique. Vito was still a man of few words, just like when he was a kid, but every word counted. His friend's name was Genco, and like everyone else here, he was Italian. He'd later become the Corleone family's consigliere. Genco couldn't take his eyes off the girl. Right in the middle of the show, some big guy stood up and blocked his view. When Genco saw who it was, he immediately backed down. Vito didn't get what was so scary about the guy. Genco explained that Fanucci was a big shot in the Italian community, a real mafioso. After the girl's performance, Genco wanted to go backstage and introduce himself, but Fanucci was there shaking down the theater owner, who happened to be the girl's father, for protection money. When the owner refused to pay, Fanucci pulled out a knife and held it to the girl's face. The owner had no choice but to hand over all his money. You'd think two grown men would step in, but to Vito's surprise, Genko quickly backed away. So Vito figured he'd better mind his own business too. Genko said nobody dared mess with a mobster like Fanucci. Everyone had to pay him protection money. What Vito didn't know was that this Fanucci would play a major role in his journey. Genko was right. Even his own father was one of Fanucci's clients, and being late with a payment was not an option. Back then, Vito was just a delivery boy at Genko's dad's grocery store. The pay was lousy, but he never slacked off at work and never brought his exhaustion home. Obviously, you couldn't give your wife and kids a warm home in circumstances like these just by working yourself like a mule. Just then, he heard voices from outside his window. Vito went over, and the guy claimed to be a fellow Italian. One look and Vito knew whatever was in there wasn't legit, so he deliberately closed the door to keep his wife from seeing. Turned out to be a stash of brand new Colt revolvers. He knew not to say what shouldn't be said. Snitching and ratting people out was a disgrace in Italian blood. Soon enough, Fanucci's tyranny hit close to home. Fanucci wanted to set up a job for his nephew, and the grocery store owner didn't dare refuse. But adding another person to the small shop meant another mouth to feed. So the owner called Vito aside. That's when Vito figured out how this world worked. He never got emotional about things, but calmly accepted the inevitability of injustice. He told the owner he understood and thanked him for all he'd done.
Você è stato sempre buono con me quando ero piccericcio.
Responding to wrongs with grace naturally leaves people feeling indebted, which is why he became the old godfather with such extensive connections. There's this famous line,
Someday, and that day may never come, I'll call upon you to do a service for me.
In fact, from his wife's earlier conversation, you could tell the owner hadn't really treated him that well. That just made the owner feel even more guilty, so he chased after Vito with a basket of vegetables. Vito politely declined and walked away with dignity. The setback at work didn't stop him from greeting his family with a smile every day. He even brought home a pear for his wife with a touch of romance. A real man swallows the bitter to give his wife and kids something sweet. One day, that neighbor who'd asked him to stash the guns suddenly showed up. The guy saw that Vito was generous and understood the code of the streets, so after buying him coffee, he offered to give him a fine rug. Vito was going to turn it down, but Clemenza said, "Your wife's gonna love it." Hearing it would make his wife happy, he changed his mind. The thing was, the rug was at a friend's place. This friend's house was upscale, clearly belonged to someone with money. Clemenza knocked, but no one was home, and there was no key under the doormat, so he pulled out professional lockpicking tools. So after all this, he's bringing me along to steal something. Vito didn't call him out on it and just kept watching him work. The way Clemenza moved stuff around and rolled up the rug, you could tell he was a pro. Meanwhile, Vito just stood there awkwardly. This was his first time taking part in stealing someone else's property. Right then, someone showed up outside. Clemenza tiptoed behind the door. Turned out it was a cop on patrol. What followed became one of cinema's most iconic scenes. Luckily, they got away with it. This wild experience seemed to open the door to a whole new world for Vito. Back in those days, immigrants in America were crammed into slums. Law and order weren't well established, and even working honest backbreaking jobs barely kept you afloat. So plenty of people at the bottom took the shortcut of stealing, robbing, and running scams to get ahead. From then on, Clemenza became Vito's best friend. This guy would later become one of the two founding members of the Corleone family. With this new outlook, Vito started pulling petty crimes with Clemenza, and their lives gradually improved. Soon their second son Fredo was born, but unfortunately he was sickly from birth, and their business kept growing, but as soon as they made some money, that devil Fanucci set his sights on them. He claimed the whole neighborhood was his turf and everyone had to show him respect. We know Vito wasn't even afraid of his father's killer, so naturally he didn't grovel to this guy like other merchants did. Instead, he watched to see what Fanucci would do first before making any moves. This was a key trait that would eventually make him a boss.
Io ve lo domando solo Rocendo per la protezione che vi rogno e vi scordo pure la malattia. Voi altri che giocate non lo sapete, rispetto per nuovo come.
Only then did Vito finally speak. I understand.
Capisci? Ma i soldi o la spada che ho amici miei, prima a parlare con
Tu c'è degli amici tuoi, chi non pochi assai, tanto per bagnare la bocca,
Sure enough, fellow countrymen are the first to screw each other over. But trying to shake down Vito for protection money felt a bit like a beggar asking for handouts. Vito was pretty sure by now that Fanucci was a fraud. Real mafiosos would never work with cops to intimidate people. For them, that would be a total disgrace. Besides, Vito had seen real mafia men since he was a kid. That evening at home, Clemenza, as the crew leader, analyzed the situation. He figured Fanucci must be with the Maranzano family, New York's biggest mafia outfit, and if they didn't pay the $200, they were as good as dead. Tessio, who'd already joined them and would become the other founding member of the Corleone family, agreed with Clemenza. Only Vito insisted it wasn't necessary. They needed to figure out whether Fanucci wanted money or their lives. After thinking for a moment, he made a proposal that stunned his two friends.
Perché numerate 50 scudi all'uno per pagare a Fanucci? Passate fare a me. C'è niente di la raggiungo io. No?
Ma come fai tu a fare che pigliare di me?
A voi oggi non mi interessa. Ma solo ricordate che vi pisci non piace.
Vito's wisdom and leadership would be proven this time. The two friends were skeptical but decided to trust him for now. The specific plan was to have the two friends go see Fanucci first and promise they'd deliver the full 200. In reality, Vito was buying time and observing Fanucci's reaction. Then came the annual Feast of San Rocco, with drums and music filling the streets. One detail about the meeting with Fanucci: Vito deliberately showed up late while Fanucci was already there waiting. When Vito arrived, Fanucci didn't get angry. If he were real mafia, he probably would have killed him already. Vito still had that commanding presence. He slapped down the $100 from his two friends on the table, not even offering his own 50 liras. He just watched Fanucci, saying nothing. Meanwhile, Fanucci was acting like a performing monkey.
Mi pare che ci sono 200 scudi sotto il mio cappello. Ragioni hai io. Solo 100 scudi.
Who knew that with just those few words, Fanucci would drop his tough act, happily take the $100 off, and even compliment him on having guts for a young guy? This whole sequence confirmed he was exactly what Vito thought, a two-bit hustler who preyed on fellow Italians and only picked on the weak. After pocketing the money, he acted like they were buddies, saying he'd hook Vito up with some big deals down the line. But Vito didn't say another word. His eyes became cold and resolute. What came next was the hunting hour. Fanucci took the money and acted like a big shot, generously donating that 100 to San Rocco. If he didn't put on a show in front of everyone, how else could he keep running his con games? Little did he know that Vito was already tracking his every move like a predator. All the buildings in the neighborhood were connected, and Vito had already mapped out his route and stashed the gun at a predetermined spot. The streets were buzzing with activity as the sacred festival ceremony took place. Vito wrapped the gun in a towel and went down to the hallway of Fanucci's building. Hearing Fanucci coming upstairs, he deliberately loosened the hallway light. When Fanucci came up and found the light out, he reached up to tighten it. The light illuminated his path, but the sudden change in brightness made it impossible for him to see that death had arrived. The gunshots blended with the fireworks, the celebration in the light concealing the death in the darkness. Vito quickly disassembled the gun, tossing different parts down different chimneys. Every detail of the plan was flawlessly executed. Then he stepped out of the shadows and merged into the noisy crowd. At this moment, it was as if he'd been baptized. He was no longer the small-time hustler he used to be. That year, his third child was born, named Michael Corleone, a boy destined to become a boss just like his father. From that point on, he officially replaced Fanucci and took over the neighborhood. But the difference was, people genuinely respected him. His word was his bond, and when he collected protection money, he actually protected people. So neighbors would come to him whenever they had problems. One day, an old lady was kicked out by her landlord for having a dog. Vito offered to help her find a new place. But the old woman had no children and was a widow. She was used to living there and probably wouldn't survive moving somewhere new. So Vito personally tracked down the landlord, who was also Italian, and very politely asked him to let the old lady stay.
Io vado mano scopato con un paesano now.
The landlord didn't know about Vito's influence in the area, so naturally he wasn't buying it, claiming he'd already rented the place to someone else who was paying top dollar. Turns out, the landlord was actually just looking to jack up the rent.
Vabbè, quanto pagano che sai un mese? 5 scudi.
Vito coolly pulled out $30, prepaying 6 months of the rent increase, and thoughtfully told the landlord not to tell the old lady. She had a lot of pride. When the 6 months are up, come see me.
Ma siete un cane a restare, eh? Un cane a restare. Sto cazzo! Sto cazzo!
The moment he heard the dog would stay, the landlord balked again and started losing it. Vito calmly channeled the presence of the future godfather.
Che fai sto piace? Via di questo, è uomo scuola. E spiace non mi c'è tu in testo vicinato che sono io. Io ti bisogna vedere come io faccio fatto.
The landlord hesitantly took the money. By now, Vito had opened an olive oil shop and become a businessman. Soon enough, that landlord came looking for him on his own. Apparently, he'd heard about Vito's standing, and his nervous, clumsy demeanor was